now.
Hello, everyone. Otto Excelsior here. We're cruising in our special craft at 23,000 feet. I have my co-pilot and electronics warfare officer, Roger Hansen, here. And we are about to set our course and switch on the Otto Matic pilot. Looks like we've got a fairly smooth cruise. You never know, though. There might be some turbulence. How have you been doing, Roger? What's going on?
I've been doing fine. I got the show going. It's streaming on Rumble, YouTube, Kick, and Twitch. And
Hi.
we're good to go.
Excellent. Well, if anyone is watching us on any of these fine platforms, please like us, leave a comment. We really appreciate those. And we'll even answer comments. And in fact, if you'd like us to talk about any specific subject, please feel free to offer suggestions in the comments. We will look at every single one and consider every suggestion given. Just nothing obscene or illegal in in the United States or its territories, please. So tonight I was thinking we need to be a little more focused, and Automatic Pilot is supposed to be a little bit about Buddhism. And when I was first asked to talk about Buddhism, my first thought was, well, my ignorance of Buddhism is vast. So nothing I say is to be taken as definitive. I am myself simply a student. Not a teacher, but perhaps a teaching assistant. I always say the Buddha is the teacher, the Dhamma is the teacher. The instructions he left behind 2,600 years ago to guide us. So what is this Buddhism thing that we're always talking about? And that is a monstrously large question to answer. The Buddha, as many of us probably know, was a nobleman who was born in what would probably be today northern India in the Himalayan mountains, where he came of a very princely family, was very wealthy, had everything you could possibly want, hot and cold running dancing girls. Every sensual pleasure was catered to, up to the level of their technology and ability at the time. He found himself dissatisfied with this and decided instead to pursue the course of asceticism, yoga, meditation, and especially what they call austerities. That is to say, basically torturing the body. You've probably seen yogis and fakers doing things like, fasting for days or sitting under the hot sun. Sometimes they pierce themselves. There's the famous bed of nails, although that's more of a faker than a yogi thing. And he found that this didn't work either. So eventually he found a middle path. And this path is the one that allowed him to see past all of the, well, he used the term samsara, which means wandering on, all of the useless idiocies and lies and wastes of time that we spend our time on. And this comes down to what Buddhism really is. And all I can say is what Buddhism is for me. For me, Buddhism is seeing past this illusion. We spend most of our time living in an illusion. We spend most of our time taking on an identity in an imaginary world that we create in our own mind. We see something and we don't see what it is. We see hundreds and thousands of things that it represents to us. And we create an amazing drama within ourselves. And this causes us immense suffering. And when the Buddha was asked what he taught, he said, I teach two things, only two things: suffering and the release from suffering, how the cessation of suffering, how to stop suffering. And that's what he saw as the important question. Not whether you deserved to have your suffering ended, not whether you should have this, whether you were worthy of it or not, but rather how you can just stop suffering. Not pain. Pain is inevitable. You're going to step on a nail and it's going to hurt. There's nothing you can do about that. But what you can do is something about the suffering that you can inflict on yourself, cursing yourself for being so stupid as to have left that nail there. Even after the nail wound is healed, still kicking yourself mentally over how you could have left a nail there. And of course, you can extrapolate this to just about anything else. So in order to do this, we have to basically get control over our minds. We have to learn to think the things we want to think and how not to think the things we don't want to think. This is an immense task. This is an immense task. But it's really the only task, because if you spend all your time trying to change things outside of yourself, you will never find any satisfaction. You know, our wants, our needs, our wishes are infinite. And the universe that we have access to is ultimately finite. If nothing else in time, 70 years is the prescribed course. And many, many people don't even make it that far. Many of them don't even make it out of the womb. And even if you live beyond that, well, another 20, 30, 40 years, even so, it comes to an end. So looking outside of ourselves for satisfaction and happiness is ultimately not going to work. In fact, anytime we seek satisfaction, pleasure, or happiness in something that's impermanent, ultimately it's going to be unsatisfactory. Even a harmless pleasure, so-called, will still bring regret that we don't have the pleasure anymore. And we may very well regret the things we had to do to gain the pleasure. And where is it now? You know, when I was quitting drinking, I would look at 20 or 30 empty booze bottles and think each one of those is a $20 bill. Where is it now? Where is it now? So these pleasures are very ephemeral, and yet we continue to pursue them. And this is in no small part because we take on an identity, which again has nothing to do with the world as we're actually experiencing it. You know, we watch that beer commercial. We want to be like that guy in the beer commercial. You consume something and you take on its power by taking on the identity of the person that takes it on. So the Buddha saw that our problems come from our own minds. And I think he also saw that one of the most difficult things to do is to take control of that mind. The first thing you have to do is realize your position in life and what's actually happening to you. And he took on the problem of suffering as being the central problem that we can deal with. Now, there's lots of other problems you can deal with. And Buddhism doesn't say you have to concentrate on suffering. You have to take this path. You have to do this. No. It's simply if you want to end suffering. That's all it's for. If you don't want to, that's fine. There's lots of other paths. We're all on paths, actually. Very often we're not aware that we're on them, and those are some of the most dangerous paths to take. And most of them don't go to any place particularly nice, as many of us know from experience. And the way there isn't that great either. But if you want suffering to cease, you have to understand what suffering is. And the Buddha said basically that this is going to get me in trouble because I'm not a super expert on this and I don't know all the terminology. But this is my limited understanding, is that we crave things. And because we crave things, we cling to them. By clinging to them, that is the suffering. Our clinging to the things we crave. So we have to stop clinging to things. And usually what we're clinging to are things in our imagination. We cling to these mental constructs, these becomings, these identities that we take on. If we can stop doing that, the suffering that this causes will cease. But we cling because of the cravings we have, and we crave things because we are ignorant of their true nature. We're ignorant of the fact, literally, we ignore the fact that getting this item, this bottle, is only going to last the night, and then it's going to be gone. And that is going to be a very unsatisfactory pleasure at the end of the day, even though it might bring a few minutes of joy and then several hours of delirium after that, and then a horrible feeling of regret the next day. So this is the epitome of a transitory pleasure, of something that's purely ephemeral. So the key is to understand what we're doing, look clearly, see who we are, where we are, and what we're up to. And a big part of that is realizing that there are so many of these identities, and realizing that we have to be in charge of our minds. The mind is like a committee. It's like a mob, like mobocracy. like the Athenian democracy of hundreds and hundreds of people shouting and trying to get the chair and trying to take over. And they usually have only limited, there's the self that just says, I want that bottle. Got to have that bottle. Ignores all the other selves. If you let that self in the driver's seat, you're doomed. If you let the self in the driver's seat that says, I'm really depressed, I'm really angry, all these defilements, anger, greed, they can take over. So the key is that you have to be the one in charge, not your feelings of anger, not your feelings of desire, not your feelings of anything, not any of these other limited selves. Some of them are very young selves that are very, very old. They go back to your childhood. You can have a 5-year-old self suddenly in charge. I want that. I'm going to get it. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. That's one of ourselves. We don't want that self in charge. When we look closely, we see that these are, again, identities we take on in an imaginary world. They have nothing to do with what's really happening. They have nothing to do with really the situation that we're in. But if we can take over, then we can quiet the child. Shut up, you brat. No, we can do it with understanding. And we can see more clearly what we want to do. And what we want to do is what's best for our long-term happiness. And that means that we have to forego things that might bring us some pleasure in the short term, but in the long term will not. Now, this sounds very simple. And I was told when this was first translated into English, they're like, this can't be the secret teachings of the Buddha. This is so simple. Yeah, well, try it. Try doing it. A lot of Buddhism is very, very simple, but it's very, very difficult. When I was first looking at Buddhism, like most Americans, I came across the kind of Mahayana neo-Buddhism of the Beats, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, and all these Buddhists that are like, drinking wine and taking drugs and having promiscuous sex. And I'm like, that sounds like a good religion for me. I was a teenager, very libidinous back then. And, you start looking into it and you have the Mahayana, especially the Tibetan Buddhism. They've got the Vajrayana schools there, and they've got wrathful deities and, wine cups made from human skulls and, and wine in the wine cups and yab yum. Oh my goodness, you can look that one up. But this is all very flashy and it catches your attention. But when you start actually looking at the Theravada, the original teachings, and reading the what the Buddha actually said, or at least the closest that we have to what he said, it's actually really very simple. You don't need wrathful deities. You don't need cosmic space Buddhas. You don't need interventions by bodhisattvas. You need a human mind and a human body. And you need to have the right attitude, the correct attitude to what you want to do with that mind and that body. And most of us don't want to do anything except get to the next pleasure, which is fine, but it's pretty aimless. And it does nothing to address all of the suffering. The way we address our suffering is usually to look for more pleasure. The pleasure brings us suffering, so we look for more pleasure. Pleasure brings us suffering, we look for more pleasure. This is not a great way to have a life. So we're trying to skip a step here in many ways. This is very confused, I know, and I'm jumping all over the place here with it. But I'm just trying to give a general idea of what Buddhism is trying to do, which is ultimately, the way I see it, is it's teaching you how to control your own mind, so that your mind isn't controlled by your defilements, by all these different selves you have in you that are really incomplete personalities, but which can take you over. And this training is very, very helpful. And here in the West, we've had so many kind of bastardized versions of it.